Hello everyone, here we're going to be looking at the matrix chapter, which I'm not going to do by sections. I'm just going to call it matrix dots. This is Matrix.0. Next section will be Matrix.1. Here's the why. For today at least, matrices allow us to use technology to take care of systems of equations. In further sections we will see more matrix applications. So all the different applications of systems of equations that we've looked at in the past, and we'll see more in this chapter as well, we can solve with matrices. And what a matrix is it's a rectangular array of numbers. Each number is an entry. Here's a picture. You can see this matrix, and they're designated by rows and columns. You can see that this matrix has 3 columns and 2 rows, and it's titled Matrix A. This speech bubble says Matrix A has 2 rows and 3 columns. It will be designated by a 2 by 3 matrix, pronounced 2 by 3. You'll see it labeled either as its name or as its name with its dimensions. Now, one thing that you might be wondering is, wow, is it rows or columns, columns or rows? Here's how I remember. It is rows and then columns. If you think back to growing up, maybe you've used one of these, an RC car, which is stood for remote controlled car, to where you can drive the cars around with a little wireless steering wheel. So RC car, RC matrix, which stands for rows and columns. So it's the rows that get mentioned first, which is why the dimensions here for this one is 2 rows and 3 columns. Now, to find different entries quickly in a matrix, it'll use the matrix name, so A, and then it'll use the row and column designation that it wants. So to find this value here of A23, it wants us to go to row 2, column 3. So here is row 2, here is column 3. Where those cross over are telling us the different entries. So A23 is element 3 that we can see there was double highlighted. Now, you need this notation so that you can point people's attention to different values in a matrix very quickly. You don't want to say, do that bottom right number. You could say A23, which is telling them it's in the second row, third column. So that's a little matrix introduction. Let's get into how we can use matrices to help solve systems. Alright, a system can be written in matrix form to help us solve this. For example, here's a system. Could we solve this with substitution, elimination, even graphing? Sure. However, in this section we're going to focus on using the technology to help do it for us. This matrix shows what this system of equation would look like written as a matrix. One thing that's unique there is that we're going to see this line called an augment line. It's going to separate. It's essentially going to represent the equal sign for us. And beyond that, it's very simple to understand how this matrix came about. Notice the numbers 2, 1, 8, 2, 1, 8. 1x, 3, 11, 1, 3, 11. So those coefficients and constants are the values that are going to be showing up in the matrix. And you might notice that the x and y's are not present. That's going to be one thing that helps speed this process up, is that all we need are the coefficients of those variables. We don't need to actually input the variables into that matrix. Alright? So we're going to rewrite these following matrices, these following systems, as matrices. Here's what this one would look like. We're going to write out the coefficients. That's a 1x there. Here's going to be my augment line representing the equal sign. So it's 1x, negative 4y, 10. Negative 2x, 1y, 14. Close off the matrix. That system's of equation in matrix form. We can even do this with 3 by 3. It's possible to solve 3 by 3 matrices by hand with substitution and elimination. Depending on what level of class you're in, you may have done some by hand, or you may not have. 3 by 3 matrices will work the same way. They'll be a little bit larger, but same concept. Negative 3x, 2y, negative 6z, equal to 2, 5, negative 3, 1, and 0, and 6, negative 1, 8, and 1. That would be that system as a matrix. So I'm going to highlight here, I'm going to fill all these values in, let you guys copy them down and try them as you are attempting to solve this matrix. So here's what it's going to do. This process is going to be on our calculator to help us solve systems of equations with matrices. We won't have to do any work by hand. We're going to take this matrix. I've showed you what it's going to look like. Here is the matrix. And we're going to have it solved for us. And what your calculator is doing is it's doing the same steps that we did by hand, such as elimination or substitution. And your solution is going to end up looking like this. And this stands for 1x is equal to 4. 1y is equal to 1. 1z is equal to 3. So the answer to this systems of equations would be 4, 1, 3, representing the x, the y, and the z. All right, we're going to learn the process of asking our calculator to solve matrices for us. I'm now going to show you the buttons. All right, so here are the button combinations. I'm going to run you through them and let you kind of see some of the things that are important. It's a very repetitive process. You're going to have to hit second and matrix a lot. Now, the matrix function is located above the x negative 1 button. So you'll hit second and then x negative 1. And that button is just a few buttons below second. So you hit second, matrix. It's going to bring up you a list. When you hit that, you'll have names, math, and edit. We will scroll over to edit and select matrix A. At other points, we'll select other matrices as well. But right now, we're going to do with matrix A. And if you're proctoring this video, feel free to pause and allow for the students to find this different menu or to ask questions. We're then going to be able to enter in the numbers once we've gone to edit and chosen matrix A. Now, this particular matrix that we need to match this example to the right has the dimensions of 3 by 4. That's going to be the first thing you have to do is type in 3, enter, 4, and enter, and then the matrix will take shape. Once you do that, you're going to enter in the numbers just like you see over to the side. Right, you'll be entering in this matrix. Now, you may have noticed that this augment line does not show up in our calculator. That's okay. It's just something that's there when we write it by hand. So pause this video as necessary once again. Now, once you've entered in your numbers, this is where it's a little repetitive. You need to exit the matrix mode. So you'll hit second and then quit. And that's above the button mode. And these buttons are right next to each other, right to the right. So if you hit second mode, it'll quit you out of the matrices back to the main page. Now what we need to do is go back into the matrix realm, which is second matrix. All right, still that x negative 1 button after you hit second. Then scroll to math. When you're in the math menu, you have to scroll down for a while. It's also faster to scroll up to go to the bottom of the list, but you'll go until you find RREF. You do not want REF, you want RREF. When you hit that, it'll take you back to your main screen, and RREF will be sitting there waiting for a matrix to show up. So to get a matrix to show up, you have to go back into the matrix one more time with second matrix. And then under the names menu, so you don't change menus this time, you'll hit enter on A, and it should show up. So on your calculator screen would be RREF, and then within that RREF, you're going to want to hit matrix A. It'll show up like that. You don't technically have to close that last parentheses. And when you hit it, you should get this matrix here. If you are unable to get that, There's going to be more practice, available to us here on the back. Whenever I return, we'll also spend some time working with matrices on the calculators. But I am confident between, the teacher, the subbing, and between you and utilizing your classmates as the teacher allows, should be able to go through this process and get it to work. Now, what this backside is giving you an opportunity to do is solve systems with this process. Now, if I asked you to do all these by hand, I'd have to give you a whole class period for it, essentially. But with matrices, we'll be able to do them very quickly. There's only a small amount of things to look out for. I'll look at one quick example here and then allow you to use your calculators to finish finding the answers using RREF. And that would be on a matrix like this. When you're going to write the matrix, you'd get this. So we'd have 2, 3, -1 and 1. You'd have -4, 9, 2, and 8. And then the bottom portion, we have -2 with the x, 0y. We do have to put that in as a space holder. All right, you may have noticed that in between here, there is a 0y. And then that's the matrix that you would use. So you'd go through that button pressing process that we saw on the other side, and then that would allow you to solve this matrix. Do keep in mind, whenever you go to do a matrix of this size, its dimensions are not 3 by 4. The dimensions for this one would be 2 by 3. So when you're in the edit portion of the menu, you'd have to shrink that down to 2 by 3 size. The homework has you addressing problems like this, so make sure that you're able to do at least one of the different sizes. An equation, systems of equations in 2 variables. Make sure you're able to do some in 2 variables. Also make sure you're able to do some in 3 variables. Very similar process. It's the same buttons that get pressed, but just make sure you're comfortable changing the dimensions of the matrix and then starting to memorize the buttons.